Today I'm here with Rob Ager of Collative Learning. Am I saying that correctly? Sorry.
Haha. It's Rob Ager of Collative Learning. Yeah.
Rob Ager of Collative Learning. That's my American accent. I'm sorry.
It was
But
a silly name for the website, but I chose it and I ended up having to stick with it.
well, it ended up teaching me a new word when I had to look it up, so I enjoy it. But I've also been enjoying your content for many years. I don't know if you started when YouTube came out or if you were making videos on the internet before that, but maybe you could give people a quick background of how you started on the internet and what you do today.
Okay, yeah. So I got started on YouTube in the very, very early days. I think it was 2006, and I don't know if YouTube had been out for long at that point. It couldn't have been very long. But at that time, there was virtually nobody doing video essay reviews or studies of movies at the time. And I was just interested in certain movies that I'd noticed things about that I was fascinated with, like Alien and The Shining. And I thought some of this really interesting stuff I've never heard of, and I'd like to share it with others. So I did it on YouTube as a little experiment and found that there was a whole ton of people out there who were really interested in this stuff and just built it up from there over the years.
So your first videos, were they on Kubrick films, specifically The Shining? I know those are the ones you're most famous for.
I try to remember now specifically what the first ones were. I know there was three that I did at the very beginning. One was Alien, one was on The Shining, and one was on. There was one other one. What the hell was it? Clockwork Orange. Yeah, those three films that I had short videos about. They were about 10 to 15 minutes long each. And yeah, huge response very quickly. 10,000 subscribers within a couple of months, and it was easy back then because there wasn't so many channels out there. So yeah, that was the beginning, and it those early videos started getting a little bit of press coverage. Wired magazine did some coverage of it in quite a negative way at first, but I quickly learned from those responses how to improve my work and started doing new videos on Scorsese's version of Cape Fear, 2001: A Space Odyssey, those kinds of movies, and just built it up from there over the years. And then there started being more positive press coverage of the videos came along. Various online websites, Time Entertainment and stuff like that started covering the videos. So that was all very encouraging.
Okay. And what were you doing before that? Are you a writer by trade, or were producing videos before that on your own?
I wasn't producing anything for YouTube, but I was making short films of my own. I was writing, producing, directing, editing. I was trying to get hands-on experience in just about every aspect of filmmaking except acting, which I always thought that's the one I'd be very poor at. So I was doing that for a number of years, probably about maybe 6 or 7 years before YouTube came along. And by the time YouTube came along, I'd been making so many of these like short films and stuff, like not like 5 minute pieces, like half-hour short films with proper scripts. And I was learning so much from that. And at the same time, I was studying the movies of the masters, Alfred Hitchcock and so on, to try and learn more how to do a better job myself as a writer and director. And as a result of that, I started to think, well, hold on, never mind my own movies. I want to share what these people have done that's been missed.
Okay. So you see yourself, I mean, do you consider yourself primarily a filmmaker at heart? Like, are you still working on active projects, movies?
I would if I had the time to do it. I wish I did because I mean, I always have ideas for fiction films of my own. I've got folders full with hundreds of pages of scripts that are partially written. Some of them, some of the treatments I've written for my own scripts have been really in depth, and there's so many of them. But it's a question of time and money. Time is the key one. But I'm a father these days, and that really does not allow for going out there and just making movies on a where you're funding your own thing. Your parenting comes before that, so that's a sacrifice that has to be done in that respect. But someday I would like to go back to making fiction films.
Okay. And do you have one film you've been working on your whole life that you would want to make, something in mind, or you're just still fishing for ideas?
Well, I did do one extremely low budget feature film called Turn in Your Grave, and I went absolutely crazy on that film with all the just layers upon layers of symbolism, and it's insane, you know. And to look at the film is technically very, very low level, but I always knew it was going to be that anyway. But I just crammed as much symbolism and complexity into it as I could, and the end result was just something that is it's unique. I'm happy that the film is so unusual, and I've had so many people who watched it, whether they like it or dislike it, they always tell me they've never seen anything like it. So I'm happy to have done that one, but there's plenty of other ones I'd like to do. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell you any of the details of any of the scripts, and people
Of
steal my
course, yeah.
ideas.
All right. So I guess one other thing I wanted to ask real quick, because we're talking about your origin story. You've been on the internet for a while and you've seen the evolution of the internet and YouTube. So I was wondering if you had any interesting stories or experiences about how you've grown this over time. Just off the top of my head, I know in some of your videos you talk about videos being taken down or imitated, and you having to reclaim ownership over them. Is this a common problem you've seen throughout the last decade?
You know what? It actually hasn't been too bad. There's been the occasional situation that I've had to deal with, and each situation has been different to the others. But you know, I've been putting these videos on YouTube since 2006, so it's actually, if you take all of the problematic events that I've had, they probably amount to less than one a year, probably. I have had things like there was one production company that decided to start throwing legal threats at me about copyright infringement, even though you know a film review or a film study falls under fair use in copyright law because it's educational and it's a critique. So that's perfectly allowed legally. But this particular film company are well known for trying to sue people and for not even paying their own people who work on the films. And they got their lawyers to make some threats to me. But fortunately, I've actually got quite a bit of personal experience of dealing with court cases because I've had other things happen in that respect over the years, and I've learned a lot about the legal process. So when I started replying to their lawyers, and it was clear to them that I understood what I was talking about in the basic legal sense, not as a full-on professional, but I wasn't making the standard kinds of mistakes that people would make. They just backed right the hell off. You know, I provided my basic legal arguments in written form, and they just left me the hell alone and never replied ever again. So that was the only legal problem I've had to deal with in terms of copyright infringement. There's been other things like there was one channel on YouTube that one of the writers, it was one of those film analysis channels that's actually like a corporate setup where it's a whole team of writers,
Mhm.
and it seems to be motivated as a sort of a clickbait thing for generating ad revenue and stuff like that. There's tons of these channels, and some of them have a lot of subscribers, and their content is far more slick than mine in terms of editing and stuff. And they know the algorithms way better than I do. But yeah, this one channel, one of the writers on there blatantly ripped off one of my written articles on my website, and they scored 500,000 views with it in about 6 months. And so I had a big complaint with them by email, and it was funny because the editor of the channel and the writer of the video, they were blaming each other for the plagiarism, but they ended up removing it, so that was all sorted. I mean,
So
sorry, go
I
on.
guess, oh no, just like in general, then I guess most people complain about YouTube and their copyright system, and you would be someone who has a lot of experience with that doing these reviews. But in general, you're saying you've had a pretty okay experience.
Well, actually, you know, there's one thing that works to my favor in this respect is that I think a lot of these copyright arguments, they're not really about the fact that you've used their footage. It's about the ad revenue. They don't want anybody doing like film studies and making money off it from ad revenue. They're like, we want the ad revenue because it's our movie. And YouTube virtually always takes the side of the copyright owner in that respect. But you know, I mean, like you know, you could get a film review show on broadcast TV, and they could use footage from a famous movie, but they don't have to hand over profits
Hmm.
for their show to the copyright holder. So why should it be like that with YouTube? I mean, if you're doing film reviews and stuff, you are advertising their product for free. But unfortunately, YouTube allows the copyright owners to claim the ad revenue. But I don't use ad revenue on my my videos anyway.
Hmm.
My channel is ad revenue free. I mean, I've had all these offers over the years from these YouTube partnership companies, and I'm just not interested in it for various reasons. And so, because I make my money through other means, through the website by selling the digital downloads and that type of thing, I'm okay with just letting the copyright holders claim the ad revenue for my videos that I put on YouTube. So they get the free advertising out of me for the movies and they get the ad revenue. So what's the point in them complaining and trying to get my videos taken down? So with those things in mind, they tend to leave me alone.
And can they force ads to run on your videos even if you don't want them?
Yeah, I think they can.
That's a shame.
Yeah, but I don't really care. It doesn't bother me if they want to do that. That's fine. As long
Yeah,
as
it's
as
expected.
long as they're not getting into all kinds of stupid legal wranglings with me. Um, yeah, that's fine.
All right. So it sounds like you have some core philosophies behind how you manage your personal brand, your production company, however you want to frame it. So no ad revenue is one. Have you considered things like Patreon, or are you always just going to sell products through your website and you think that's
I've
the most
I,
legitimate
I
way?
started a Patreon
Oh, really?
a
Okay.
couple of years ago, yeah, and it's up and running, and there's quite a bit of content that can be accessed there by the patrons. But I'd find the digital download system seems to work a lot better. I mean, my audience have got the choice for the Patreon or for the digital downloads, and the vast majority of them go for the digital downloads because they get to select the individual film analysis videos or whatever the other subject. They get to pick them individually and just pay for them, and then they get to keep the video because they've downloaded it. Whereas with the Patreon, it costs them less because they're doing it monthly with a small amount, but they have to just accept whatever I give them each month, which is not my entire back catalogue. I mean, that would
Hmm.
be crazy of me to do that. I've got hundreds of hours of material on sale on the site. For me to just put it all available to Patreon, then somebody just pays $5 and accesses hundreds of hours worth of stuff. That'd be a terrible business decision.
Yeah. So do you make a decision over time to take certain videos and then upload them to YouTube, or is that just like a
Yeah,
time frame thing?
sometimes I might go through my back catalogue and pick something that I made about 6 years ago and go, oh, it's about time I put that one on YouTube. And sometimes I do that if I'm having a period when it's difficult for me to create new content. I can always fall back on the back catalogue to
Yeah, that's
upload.
useful.
Yeah, because with YouTube, if you disappear for 2 or 3 weeks and you don't produce any new content at all, everyone seems to start forgetting that you exist. So you have to consistently get something new out at least once a week. But sometimes I don't even manage that though.
So I was going to ask to that end then. So even if you didn't stick to a personal YouTube schedule, you have some sort of obligation of Patreons. And I'm sure as a writer, you have some sort of routine, some regimen.
Mm.
So I was curious, just as someone who's been on the internet for so long, do you have a system? What sort of things have worked for you over the years? What things haven't worked? What is your week like, I guess?
Well, I mean, I tend to work typically a standard 35 hour week like most people would. I would probably do more than that, except I'm a father, so I spend quite a bit of time doing parenting stuff. And this past year with the COVID has been kind of awkward in that respect because I mean the whole lockdowns thing didn't really cause any problem for me in terms of running the business, because I don't need to be around people to do the work. I just have to be in the office and do the
Hmm.
work there on my own. I don't hire anybody else. I don't have anybody assisting. So with the lockdown, I mean, actually my sales fired through the roof the first few months.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
I mean, I've saved up a lot of extra money in that time. I would still rather have had a free life though. um, but the big sort of difficulty came when they started closing the schools, and my daughter
Yeah,
was
I
off.
imagine.
So I was spending half of the week with my daughter, keeping her busy and that kind of thing. And that's That's happened twice in the last year. They've closed the schools for a long period here.
You just have the one child.
Yeah, she's 7 years old. Yeah.
So I'm from the U.S. for context, so it may be a little different there. Maybe we could get into the experiences later. But so what has COVID done? It just hasn't affected your workflow. It's more just your work-life balance has been thrown out of whack.
Yeah. So just mainly the school closure has been a problem. I mean, I really don't like the whole lockdown thing anyway. I kind of agree with the initial lockdown at the beginning because there was so little known about the whole thing. But since then, I think there's been quite a big overreaction from government. And I'm not going down a sort of conspiracy route on that. I just think it's been a huge overreaction. And it's a very complex situation, though, isn't it? Because it affects everybody in the world, and you got everybody reacting to it, and you got everybody reacting to each other's reactions, and it's so unbelievably complex. So I won't go heavily into that because we could be talking all day about it.
Well, yeah. So I mean, briefly, I think everyone can agree. Both sides have their exaggerated takes. One is so scared of the vaccine, of the control, and the other one is so adamant about instilling that control because they see it as a life or death situation.
Yeah.
But I think everyone, the moderates who aren't on social media all day, can all agree, like, as long as we're just wearing masks, we're doing what we can. We're all trying to get out of this as soon as possible. No one enjoys this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a vax choicer. They talk about people's being pro or anti-vaccine. I just think everyone should just make their own decision on it. I mean, personally, at the moment, I don't want any vaccine because they've not been tested long term, and they're a fairly new type of vaccine. So for that reason, but I'm not in the vulnerable group anyway. So I only know one person who's died from the COVID. I mean, tragic anyway. But and I know two other people who were hospitalised who came back out. But it's not like I've been seeing the massive deaths and hospitalisations among people I know. That was we were all told at the beginning. I mean, it has been bad, but I just don't think it's been nearly as bad as the models claimed. So yeah,
maybe this can transition into some of your stuff, specifically like, I guess, like Full Metal Jacket, anything having to do with propaganda. There's this idea of selling the scary narrative is a greater good because you need this, otherwise people won't take it seriously.
Yeah.
So do you see this something being warned of in art? It's like, would you call it propaganda, I guess?
Sorry, would I call the COVID reactions propaganda?
I guess would you call the general sentiment of like herd immunity trying to push, at least, if they have the choice of vaccine, still trying to encourage them to get the vaccine? Would you see this as a form of social manipulation?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely been a lot of propaganda, but propaganda in itself is not always inherently a bad thing. I mean,
of course, yeah.
I always try and look at the view from the other side. If you don't do that, then there's no point sort of debating things. I mean, from the government's position, a lot of people just couldn't care less about the lockdown and they want to party and stuff like that. And so from the government's position, I suppose they think, well, we need to terrify people into obeying the lockdown. So that we can sort this out. And you can think of that as being a noble cause, and I suppose it is in a way. But the problem with that is that because they exaggerate it, then they lose trust in the long term because people think, well, you lied to us last time, you exaggerated this, so now I'm not going to believe hardly anything you say. So that's a tough dilemma. I think it's generally better for the government to just come out and be straight up as possible about things like this, but that seems to be something that governments really don't want to do. Everything's done with these PR experts. Oh, if we do this, people react like this. If we tell them this little white lie, then we can get this result. But there's a huge long-term distrust of government problem that's been going on for a long time, and it is the basis for all the wide spread of conspiracy theories over the last couple of decades. I think governments they've brought it on themselves.
Sorry, do you hear me? I may have cut out for a second.
What did you say?
No, I may have cut out for a second. Sorry. I was just clarifying. So this is from the UK perspective, right? Is there anything in particular that you distrust about how the government has been handling this? Do you just think it's generally over-exaggeration in a more authoritarian leaning?
I don't know about authoritarian. It can definitely be perceived as that way. But at the same time, if you've got a virus that really is going to kill tons of people, what other choice do you have than to do a lockdown? So
Of course.
I look at it from that perspective on the one hand, but I do think that the governments have been listening to the wrong scientists. Like a lot of people, I've been looking around online and listening to all kinds of different scientist opinions from all over the place, including the ones in the news media and the ones who aren't getting news media coverage. And I've been finding that a lot of the ones who didn't get much news media coverage seem to be the ones who predicted things more accurately. I
Hmm.
mean, in the early stages last year, I knew very quickly that this virus was seasonal. When the government scientists were saying they weren't sure, all you had to do was go and look at the world map of where all the deaths were going on, and the vast majority were northern hemisphere, and there was hardly any southern hemisphere. So I looked at that and I thought that's just going to flip around the other way when it comes to the big season change in 6 months, and that's what happened. And things like that just seem to be so obvious that the government scientists didn't want to acknowledge. So
I see. I think in general, I'm not sure what it's like in the UK, but in the US, at least under Trump, there's always the risk of, if you present that other side, more extreme people will take that as evidence and use it for anything. But I think those people are so far gone anyway. It
yeah,
doesn't matter what you tell them; they're going to find that evidence and use it to support the ideology.
yeah. It's such a shame. I mean, there's so much division. We've got it here, but I know you guys have got it really bad in America, the division. And yeah, it's like people just being pushed to these extreme camps on either side. And I just think we need a hell of a lot more people in the middle ground who are, gradually bringing people from the extremes, finding the commonalities between them and bring them together in the middle. It's quite a monumental task to do, though, because I mean, there's a lot of people out there who don't want that to happen. A lot of people like it being thoroughly divided. Yeah. And
So,
I'm not just talking about like people in power positions. There are everyday people in the street who love the division.
oh yeah, I think they don't realize what they love about it, but yeah, they want the strife itself. That
Yeah,
is giving the result. That's giving what they're craving.
yeah.
I was going to ask, like, do you see this in your personal life, like people being brought to these two polar extreme sides more and more? And do you see it being fueled by any particular websites or technology in general?
Yeah, I see quite a bit of it. It's quite interesting though because I find that when I speak to people in person, whichever side of the so-called spectrum they come from, they're usually a lot more amicable and willing to discuss things in a more open way in person. It's when they start communicating online that it all falls to pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally, I've over the years, I've tried to keep a wide variety of friends in terms of their worldviews. So I have friends who are very, very, what you would call left wing, whatever that actually means these days. And I've also got friends who are very right wing. And on both sides, I've got friends who have views that I strongly disagree with, and in some cases find almost offensive. But I consider it a good exercise for me to stay in touch with those people, have some tolerance, and try to have some understanding for why they view things the way they do. So, I try and hang around with people from all across the spectrum, and I think that's the healthy approach to take. And I learn from both sides. Sometimes they teach me things that I thought I had figured out. And I just wish more people would do that because a lot of people are socially isolating themselves, ironically, from people whose opinions they disagree with, and they shouldn't do that.
This ties into a few things, I guess. One is we discussed in emails the idea of like parental authority dependency, this need to
Yeah,
have someone indoctrinating, not indoctrinating, but telling us what to do because it lessens your decision fatigue. It makes your life a little bit less anxious. And the other part of that is, but we could just start with that.
hmm
Do you think that's a big part of this too? People want
yes.
to feel like we're all
It's
united
well, I
against
mean,
a common enemy.
it's a term that I've sort of coined in my own thinking. I call it PADS, PADS, which seems like an appropriate acronym for Parental Authority Dependency Syndrome. And I've just sort of come to this conclusion that some people just haven't let go of those protective parent figures from when they were younger, and they're always looking for something to replace that with. I think it's very common. Religion has definitely served that purpose at many points over the centuries and still does for a lot of people. And a lot of people turn to cults, and a lot of people turn to government or political parties or the police. So, some people turn to street gangs, but they're always looking for some protective belonging, and so that they don't have to feel like, hey, it's me on my own and I'm responsible for my own well-being. It seems to be so many people have difficulty reaching that point, which I think is quite a mature point to reach. And it's almost like a Buddhist position where it's like, it's just me, the calm eye in the storm. I don't need to be dependent upon anybody else. I'm just chilling in the middle, and all the terrible things can be happening. And the ones that I can't do anything about, I just accept them and deal with them with grace. That seems to be rare.
Yeah, it's rare to see. Well, it depends on the politician you're talking about. I definitely see a tendency toward people to trend to, well, I guess another question for you is, what do you think of the role of technology in this? Because the isolation was happening before COVID, right? So
Yeah.
people are becoming isolated, trending toward these groups, but now we've been expedited toward this like Solaria type existence where we're all isolated now.
Yeah.
So do you think we're necessarily, what is the future of a community, right? How are we going to relate to these groups? What do you think about this?
Well, there's a whole load of questions thrown together there in one.
We could start with social media, I guess, because
Yeah,
that's like the
yeah.
prototype. Do you see it as a harm? Do you see it
Well,
as hurting you or your children?
in some ways, it's really, really good. I mean, when I get to keep in touch with close family members who've moved across the other side of the world, how else would I keep in touch with them in the way that I do without the social media? It's absolutely wonderful for that type of thing. And there's a lot of people. I used to work in mental health many years ago, and I used to do home visits to people in the community who were they were put into apartments in the community, and the government would basically say, "Oh, look, they've got freedom, they've got lifestyle choice," but these people would be isolated because they couldn't make friends socially in the community because of their mental health problems. But people like that and the elderly, they have got this wonderful thing, this social media, where suddenly they got access, they can talk to people and stuff. Even if it's only a brief little bit of interaction, I think it helps give them something to latch onto the external world that they would otherwise miss. So I think it's a wonderful thing for a lot of people. Um, I don't blame the technology in itself for causing problems. The problem is people. The technology is just there. It's what it is. It's how we use it.
It's just a tool.
That is the problem. I know there's a lot of people are upset with the big tech companies for trying to impose their views and to shut out certain types of debate and opinions and stuff. And yeah, I do consider that to be a problem. But I think the solution to that is for people to just start looking elsewhere and say, right, well, I'll use those social media platforms to get whatever benefits I get from them, but I'll go and look elsewhere and use other means of communication in order to have the discussions that the big tech media don't want me to have. I think it's up to everybody to try and seek that out. Because I mean, like the internet is like, it's huge. There are millions upon millions of websites. And yet so many people have come to this point where they think that the internet is Facebook, Twitter, and just a handful of social media websites, YouTube and so on. And to them, that is the internet. It's like you're only accessing a tiny grain of sand of it. So people need to get
Yeah.
out there more, at least online and in the world. Yeah.
It's hard to predict how that's going to be too, because there is this trend toward monopolies, it seems. Even if the companies don't become monopolies, the platforms do, where people seek out one-stop shopping for every sort of thing. Maybe that's just inherent in humanity. We want something simpler. Maybe that gets into the fear of complexity thing we were discussing too.
Yeah.
But I mean, so in general, I agree. It's a good tool. It helps people. I think there's also the danger of it being a fantasy world too, where people fall into the rabbit hole, either fake news or like a World of Warcraft type of existence, or just like being on social media all the time. Do you see that being like an addictive force in your life? Do you feel that urge to post all the time and feel validation?
Personally, I'm not too bad in that respect. I'm more interested in my work than I am in social media.
That's
Ironically, my stuff is posted on social media. Like, for example, YouTube. There's not much stuff that I watch on YouTube myself. I'm too busy making my own videos for it. There's a handful, maybe a dozen channels that I'll go and have a glance at every now and then. Channels that I know typically put out stuff that I find amusing or interesting. But I don't spend a lot of time browsing around on social media. I don't gather hundreds upon hundreds of or thousands of friends on Facebook. I mean, like my personal Facebook page, I get tons of people trying to friend me on there who I've never met, because they've watched the YouTube videos. And I'm like, just go to my official Facebook page, and the stuff is there, but don't send me a personal friend request. That's for my close friends and family, people who I know in the real world. So yeah, I mean, I don't find myself drawn into it too much because I find the work that I'm doing a lot more interesting, and like the books that I read are more interesting than what is being said on social media as well. So maybe a lot of people just don't have enough things that interest them in order to distract themselves from social media. I can't remember. Was there another
a good
question you
question.
asked there?
Yeah, here's a question then.
Yeah.
It may just be a generational thing too, but if you grow up not knowing the world before the internet and you have a phone in your hands, like maybe you'd be conditioned into this. So have you thought about this for your own daughter? Like, will
Yeah,
she have a phone when she's young?
yeah.
How does she
It's.
handle
I mean, she watches quite a lot of Facebook, and especially with the lockdown, and wasn't allowed to take it out anywhere. It's like, what the hell do you do? Get her to play some video games. She'll watch the occasional movie with me. She can't play with any friends, so you got no choice but to let her watch lots of YouTube. And she's got her favorite channels. But it's funny because she loves Minecraft. She watches a ton of Minecraft videos, but she'll play Minecraft with me as well. We do two-player stuff on that, and that's fantastic. And Minecraft has been amazing for teaching her basic skills. I mean, she learned how to handle menu systems and do searches within the Minecraft game. And then I saw how she ported those abilities across to the internet itself and to doing YouTube searches and so on. So that was incredibly educational. But yeah, I mean, it's up to me as a parent to get it out as much as I can, but the lockdowns make that really difficult. I don't plan on getting a phone for as long as possible. I'm going to avoid it.
Yeah, I don't envy that decision, but I think
Sorry,
that's interesting.
can I just add something there as well? I mean, I actually made the decision a little while ago that I mean, I hardly ever use smartphones myself, but I've got one, and I made the decision to really back away from the thing and use it even less. To the point where I went and bought a second phone, which is like made for elderly people, where you can actually take the battery out of it whenever you want.
Mhm.
Because I just don't like this thing where if I'm carrying a smartphone around everywhere, and whether I turn the thing on or off, it's being tracked. I don't want to be tracked all the time. Why? I'm not a terror threat or anything like that. Why should I be tracked? So I'm really moving away from the whole smartphone thing, and just use it sporadically and not even take it out with me. And I think everybody should do that, really. Start backing
I
away
was
from them.
actually like that for quite a while. I just upgraded my phone recently, but I kept a not like a old, battery removal phone, but a very old, slow one to try to resist the temptation of having that
Yeah.
always in your pocket. So that's interesting. But
Uh,
unfortunately for work, I do have to have one now.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is they are so useful. It's funny because when I bought the really low level phone with the removable battery, the functionality of it is just ancient, and I thought, wow, did I used to use these? But like on my smartphone, I deliberately don't even pay for internet access, because when I'm out and about, I just do not want to be dealing with emails. I don't want to be searching online, so I deliberately make it so that I can't. So my phone is only I can only use it for text messages and phone calls, and I keep it like that. And I've kept it like that over the years, and I intend to stay that way.
Okay, so that's one thing you do for your workflow, I guess. You pretty much eliminate all technological distractions. You really just focus on your work. You don't worry about your fans, the responses. You just do what you have to do.
Oh, I try and keep up with the fan mail and stuff. It's
Of
not
course,
always
yeah.
easy, but usually I'll spend like maybe 20 minutes, half an hour a day dealing with that. But often that's not even enough to keep up with it. So yeah.
So I guess here's one question. Maybe you can tell me as a Kubrick expert. We have this idealized version of our relationship with technology. Maybe it's like a bit of Star Trek too, where we have these phones in our pocket and we have these doors that open on command and everything works at the touch of our fingers. And then we have what we just discussed, this imperfect relationship with technology where we have to sort of limit our interaction with it. What do you see for the future of this? Are we eventually going to approach this vision these artists had of how we're going to seamlessly integrate with it? Or do you think there's always going to be a barrier, a friction between us and technology?
I think there's always going to be a barrier, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like with the whole television thing and the virtual reality. For a long time, I've thought that VR technology is only going to be used in a very limited way because I think people like the separation when they look at a screen where it's actually a rectangular box that's confined in front of them. So it is a separate reality. You're aware that you are separate from it, so you can interact with it, but it doesn't swallow you, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that is going to carry on, and I haven't got a virtual reality gaming system yet. I've been thinking of getting one just to play around with
Have you
it.
tried?
I've had a little go of it, yeah. But I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like spending too much time in the virtual reality games because it messes with the head, so they limit the time on it. So obviously they don't want to disappear down that technological rabbit hole. So yeah, I think people will always have an instinct to keep a separation between the technological reality and everything else. But I can certainly see how movies like The Matrix can be seen as being almost like a crystal ball to an extent. It's funny because I think the danger is less in the aesthetic sense. I think aesthetically, at the physical sense, we do maintain our distance with the technology and our touch wood connection with the physical world. But it's the belief system immersion with the technology that where I think the real danger is. With people let their beliefs be designed by technological interaction. I mean, when you think about it, with all this lockdown stuff, you're locked in your house, you're away from the world, you're not seeing anybody. Your whole reality is pretty much of what's going on outside your
Yeah,
house is
it is
being
very true.
formed by the friggin' internet and the TV.
And I think it, like what you said, I may even push back a bit on that. We already have blurred the lines virtually, where we have these deep fakes now for videos, images. You can just generate fake buildings, people, cars, anything. Um, I don't know. I see a danger in the future for this. Do you think humans are going to be able to coexist with this level of mimicry, or is there always going to be this issue where we're not going to be able to discern reality from fake news or fake information, even?
Well, it's interesting the deep fakes things. I remember you mentioned that in your email, and I mean I remember watching the one on The Shining, the Jim Carrey, Jack Nicholson, The Shining, and I've seen a couple of other ones, and from those ones that I've seen, it was clear to me that there was a certain amount of cheating going on to make the deep fakes look more impressive than they actually are. I mean, Jim Carrey, when they used like a younger version of him with the Jack Nicholson, and Jim Carrey's face lent itself very well towards the deep fakes because he had a very smooth skinned face. There wasn't a lot of wrinkles and lines there, so it's kind of easier to CGI his face over Jack Nicholson. But if you start trying to do that with people who are much older, who have more complex facial features, it all starts to fall apart. So, I'm not as impressed with the quality of the deep fakes myself. But I've noticed this thing with a lot of the technology. I've talked about this before in terms of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of stuff that's put out marketing wise that makes AI appear far better than it actually is. We see all those videos on YouTube where it's like, oh, look, they're creating Terminator type robots that can run through forests, or, this one can climb walls and all that kind of thing. And it looks great when you look at those video clips. But when you start reading up on behind the scenes, it turns out that there's actually a hell of a lot of failed takes where the robots just fall again and again and again and keep
Yeah, it's an
collapsing.
advertisement.
Yeah, and eventually they get a take that looks great and they put that out as if the robot can do it every time. Yeah.
Would you consider there being a danger to, I guess, exaggeration, we'll call it, or clickbait, we'll call it, where there's this kernel of truth to it, and now it's been warped to this point of view where it's in an extreme form? Like, clearly we shouldn't be regulating this. I don't think the government should have a say on what level of this is allowed. But when it comes to, let's say, photoshopping models or having these clickbait headlines, do you consider this a danger to public discourse? Like, is it reducing the signal to noise ratio of all the information we have to consume?
I think I tend to agree with your position about not having it all government regulated, because then they just regulate it towards whatever they want to do.
I
So
would never trust someone to
yeah,
figure that out. It's too hard.
but I suppose I'd fall back on the same sort of answer that I gave you earlier regarding the idea that it's up to us, the people, to educate ourselves and each other so that we can see through these things. We need to not let ourselves be sucked into these bubbles and this fake reality. But it's an interesting thing that a lot of people seem to want a fake reality. That's the problem. It's not the corporations. It's not the propagandists. It's so many people do not want to live in a reality where they have an appreciation of the complex truth. They want a simplistic fantasy version of reality that makes them feel okay, and they don't seem to want to break out of that. A lot of people are like that. I don't know what percentage, but there's certainly plenty of them. Yeah.
It's hard to say want. I sort of agree with you, but I would call it almost like an internal desire, like almost chemical. Like in the same way that you need a tribe unit, not a tribe maybe, but a pack and a parental figure, a leader. I guess I see it as just needing to have the simple enemy versus the good guy. I have to be on the good side, and that simplifies all the anxieties in my life.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe it is a coping mechanism, something that's evolved in us to keep us more functional, just simplify everything around us.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to change. I mean, you get a lot of people talking about like the conspiracy interpretations of what's going on. Oh, we've got people, elitists are trying to do this and trying to do that. Well, that's always happened. There's always been elitists in the world who are trying to do this, trying to change things and shape things their own way. Sometimes they succeed to an extent, sometimes they don't. It's always been happening, and it's not even like there's one group of elitists. There's different groups of elitists all over the world who are competing with each other, and same within countries. It's not like there's a single elite group controlling everything. It's too complex for that. Um,
Yeah, even that idea shows the conspiracy nature. There can never just be one master behind everything. At least
yeah.
like be realistic and have multiple masters behind the scenes.
Yeah, yeah. But in a way, it's kind of good that there's always competing elitists, because it means that none of them can ever completely get control. And if they do come anywhere near getting control, then they start fighting each other anyway. I mean, I suppose the scariest kind of scenario, and maybe it's already been happening for a long time to an extent, is Orwell's 1984, where the world was divided up into basically three large countries who are constantly at war with each other, because each country cannot maintain control over its population without an enemy. So there's a sort of unspoken agreement between the three countries that we will have wars with each other so that everybody else can be kept in line by the threat of the other. I suppose to an extent the world does work like that already.
Yeah, that's a trope we see a lot. I know in Watchmen too, that's a big thing where they literally construct a threat, an alien threat, just to unite humanity against.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. Do you think we're fated to the three-party fighting system, or do you think we'll ever have some sort of utopic army
Well,
across the globe?
it's a weird one, because I think that kind of system does sort of exist in some ways. I wouldn't. It's not to the level it is in Orwell's 1984, but there are elements of that that go on in the world. But I think most of the time, the people who do engineer conflict really do believe that what they're doing is for the greater good of humanity. That they believe in what they're doing. I don't think. I mean, I worked on probation many years back, and I worked with paedophiles. And it's sit and discuss with them, their crimes. Look at the case files and stuff. And it amazed me how people could rationalize their own crimes, even on a subject like that. And so when it comes to people trying to engineer society in this way or the other, I think most of the time they do actually believe in what they're doing. And they might get nasty about it, but that's because they view other people who disagree with them as being stupid or irresponsible. There's a lot of
Or
that
the
goes
enemy.
on.
Yeah.
And sometimes the elitists get it right. Sometimes they bring about changes that are for the greater good. I mean, the internet itself was, you could say that was created by the elitists, created by the CIA as a communication system for themselves. You could argue it's an elitist, secretive communication system, and then it gets put out there and the whole world uses it, and you could say that's a good thing. I try and think of it like if I was running things, if I was in a very, very powerful position running a country or a city or whatever, how would you run things in a way that didn't annoy people, that didn't make people distrust you, that didn't create groups who think you're a conspirator? When you think about it that way, it would be near impossible to do. Anyone who's in
Yeah.
any power position is going to find people who severely distrust them and think they're up to no good. I mean, I've even had this like at low level with like doing film shoots, where I was like producing and directing my own short films. And like there was times when I had 25, 30 people working voluntary for me on a film shoot. And every now and then there would be one or two of them who just severely distrusted me and thought that I was trying to, I don't know, rip them off, not give them credit for the work. I would get that even at that level with a voluntary film shoot. So you imagine what it's like when you go far up the ladder and you're in a boardroom and you're running things and you're making decisions and making announcements. There's always going to be people who distrust you and think there's a conspiracy. Yeah.
I think this is why so much time is put into the PR, the marketing. And I think you've spoken in your videos about how Kubrick was hired by the government and worked with them to create goodwill. So I guess, would you say Kubrick was an anti-propaganda type of person, or he sort of embraced it as long as he could put his artistic touch on that?
Actually, it's interesting there that you say that. Did you say that Kubrick was
Maybe you could
hired by the
clarify, maybe
government?
just remembering
No, no. I
in
think.
2001.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he approached them as far as from all the research that I've
Oh,
done
got
with
it.
the archives and stuff. He approached them with a commercial movie product that he knew they wouldn't be able to resist because they would look at it and go, "Wow, this really promotes our space race stuff." And and I think he knew damn well that that was going to be the reaction, and they would throw the money at him. And also, he'd annoyed them so much with Doctor Strangelove. And I guess they kind of thought, well, he seems to have come around to our position, and I can't believe they fell for it. To be honest, they should
I
have looked.
see.
They should have looked at Doctor Strangelove and knew, hang on, this guy, he's not on our side. They should have known that, but they fell for it. But also he did the very clever thing of getting Arthur C. Clarke involved and attributing the writing process to Arthur C. Clarke when it wasn't. He basically used Arthur C. Clarke, and Kubrick called all the shots, the creative decisions, and took it all away from Clarke's control anyway. But as far as the investors knew, it was a Clarke story. So it was such an incredibly clever move he did there. But yeah, I think Kubrick was extremely anti-authoritarian, and you don't even have to go down a conspiracy route on that. You only have to look at Doctor Strangelove, Clockwork Orange, and it's so
That makes
obvious.
more sense. I was under the impression the government had approached at some point to work with them on 2001, but now it makes more sense.
Yeah, well, NASA were involved in helping make that film and funding it, and multiple corporations, IBM. I can't remember the names of the others. There's a whole bunch of them in the archives where he had letters back and forth to them, and they all gave technical staff and financial support and so on. That I suppose in terms of the government being involved, as to my knowledge, it was just NASA. It's a branch of government, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it's not like they were there trying to make space program look good. It was more just to inspire space travel among the people, right?
Yeah, I think so. I do think that they were doing that with an intention of making the moon landing seem even more grandiose.
Mm.
I mean that's definitely a case. I mean, I've seen a behind the scenes documentary that was now along that I can't remember the name of, that Kubrick had put together to promote the creation of the movie when he was making it. And he's got all interviews with all these NASA people and scientists who are involved, and all these companies are all mentioned in the video. But that video wasn't put out publicly; it was put out to other corporations. So we used the corporations that were already investing, made a video about that, and then showed it to other corporations to get them on board, and they all went for it. So
he was a bit of a marketer too.
incredible, incredible.
So yeah, I was going to ask you. So then, would you say Kubrick is your favorite director of all time?
I think he's probably the one who I respect the most in terms of just the sheer genius of how he put everything together and how he managed to get the creative freedom and stuff like that. Favorite director? Some people might laugh at this, but I think Spielberg is just an absolutely astoundingly good director in the aesthetic sense, or at least back when he was doing the old classic movies like Poltergeist. Which he did. He didn't direct that one. No, he did. You read behind the scenes, he did that one. Some of those early Spielberg films, they just astound me with the level of skill in his direction. And in some ways, he was better than Kubrick. It depends. I mean, I've got different favorite directors for different types of things. If I want if I want Freudian psychology, Hitchcock is the man. If I want crazy dream logic, David Lynch is the man.
So all the classics, though, you're a fan of all of them.
Yeah.
Was there any particular director that may be a bit more obscure, or someone you don't plan on making videos about? Maybe you could talk about something viewers haven't heard of.
Do you mean modern directors or old-time ones?
Oh, anything. It could be old, could be new. It just seems like most of what you do is pretty mainstream. So I was just wondering if there's anything, maybe too small to ever make a video on, but a movie you really enjoyed or a director you really enjoyed.
I've talked about this movie before, but the director hasn't really gone on to do a hell of a lot that I know of. But Snowtown, I thought, was a very impressive film. Incredibly daring for a first feature, the Australian movie about the serial killers. Justin Kurzel directed that one, and I've got high hopes for him. I'm looking forward to seeing whatever he does next. He did another movie about Ned Kelly.
Another Australian killer.
Yeah, and that was okay. It was definitely worth a watch. It didn't impress me as much as Snowtown, but it was certainly interesting. So I've got a lot of high hopes for him. Ari Aster of Hereditary. That second film he did, I wasn't too impressed with it. But then his heart wasn't really in that one because he'd already agreed to do that before Hereditary came out and became a hit. And I think if he'd have known, he wouldn't have agreed to do that film. So I'm really interested to see what Ari Aster comes up with next because he is super talented. That's off the top of my head. There are some other smaller directors around at the moment that I've got my eye on. I'm very interested to see what they do, but I can't remember their names right now.
Are you someone who follows modern movie releases? Like, do you enjoy watching, huge Transformers spectacles, Godzilla versus Kong, or do you stick to these more artistic, complex movies?
No, I've got quite a wide variety of movies that I watch. Lately I've been going through all the classic James Bond movies just for the crazy entertainment value. Ironically, I'm going to be doing some videos on those movies soon as well. It's funny because sometimes I watch these kinds of movies just thinking, I just want some just straight entertainment. I want guaranteed entertainment and escapism. And I'll put something on and I'll really get into it. And then I'll realize, hang on, there's reasons why this movie is so brilliantly entertaining. It might seem stupid, but when you study it, it's like, wow, there's a lot more there. I like the old stupid 1980s ninja movies that came out. They're so dumb, but they're so fun as well.
You appreciate all type of film.
Yeah. Modern movies, I tend not to watch many of the big budget CGI ones. It bores me because I just feel like I'm watching cartoons. At least with those, like say something like Schwarzenegger's Commando, the stupid action movie. At least when I'm watching it, I know that some effort has been done to do actual real stunts and some in-camera special effects and stuff. But when it's all CGI, it really kills it for me. Yeah.
Do you feel any sort of pain or anguish when you see something like Blade Runner or Predator get remade, or do you feel like this is just a natural part of the process we have to deal with?
It doesn't bother me. I really don't mind. I mean, I've ranted against Blade Runner 2049 online. I hate it. I've put a few videos on that. I just think it's just one of the most overrated things ever. But it doesn't bother me that these remakes and very silly sequels and reboots get done, because for me it just shows even more how great the originals were. I mean, I can watch the original RoboCop, and it is not ruined by the remake. So it's some people don't like that though. They feel like the original is spoiled, but that doesn't happen for me.
I guess this also ties into just like the loss of having a younger audience go back to these older movies. So I guess at least you think it'll be something to get them to go watch the older ones if they have enough interest in the newer ones.
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. I do have a lot of concerns that certain types of classic movies, classic content, or well, classic books, anything, is kind of disappearing because they're not really in circulation enough. Like when I was a kid, Laurel and Hardy were made a long, long time before I was born. I was born in the 1970s, and Laurel and Hardy had finished making their movies decades before that. But Laurel and Hardy were always playing on TV, so I was exposed to that as a kid, and that went for a lot of other things. A lot of other classic movies that were made from way before I was born, I saw them on TV. And there was no internet, so you couldn't just say, "Oh, I'm not going to watch this. I'm going to go and look for Minecraft videos or whatever." You had to look at what was on TV, and sometimes you had to choose, well, I'm going to sit and watch this, which I'm not familiar with, and which might be rubbish, but I've only got 4 channels to look at, and this seems to be the most interesting. And through that, you can end up discovering some great classic movies. But these days, I think people are missing out, and part of this seems to be to do with the way old content is marketed. Like, say, well, I'll go back to the example of Laurel and Hardy. You can buy the Laurel and Hardy box set, which is a huge collection of DVDs, and you pay a lot of money for it. I don't know how much it's going for now, but I know it used to be going for well over £100. But who's going to buy that? The younger generation aren't going to spend that kind of money on it. You'll get like older people like myself who have got some nostalgia for it who will buy it. Whereas if they took those Laurel and Hardys and made them accessible and played them on TV in some way, shape, or form, then a new audience could be found for them. And the audience is definitely there because, like, I mean, I've shown my daughter quite a few Laurel and Hardys, and she loves them. And I've seen this over the years. Kids of any generation, they watch a few episodes of Laurel and Hardy, and they absolutely love it. And that's amazing considering how old those films look, and they're black and white and terribly edited and all the rest of it. So I think the underplaying of classics might lead to some of them being basically culturally lost. That bothers me.
That's funny because I actually remember my parents showing me Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy too as a kid, and I enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Even like the Goon Show I found later in life, and that seems pretty outdated. One of my past talks was actually with Jason Scott of Internet Archive, where they are archiving all this old media. So I think it would be good to see more of this in circulation.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes down to copyright, and that's why it's being locked up or not seen as much.
Absolutely.
I know I've seen a lot of Columbo. I think they made an official Columbo YouTube channel, and they put all the episodes out there for free. So maybe
that's great
the future.
because they were fantastic. The old Columbos, it's so funny as well.
Yeah, and I never seen them until my 20s because they went up on YouTube. I just never thought to see it or look for it, even though I'd heard of it.
I mean, that's one of my motives with the film analysis stuff. I mean, I often do movies that people are familiar with because that's how you get your audience, and people will buy film analysis of stuff that they're familiar with. But every now and then I like to take something that's obscure, like Psycho 2, which I just think is absolutely almost perfect from beginning to end. Movies that have just been almost totally forgotten, no one talks about anymore, and I'll just do a criminally forgotten movies episode on that, and then it's appreciated, and a lot of people come back and say, "Wow, I went and watched that because you talked about it," and yeah, it is amazing, so Yeah, I like to try and keep certain things alive, and I've actually been thinking for a long time of doing some videos on Laurel and Hardy as well, because I think there's a lot of genius in how they did the stuff that hasn't really been explored by film critics.
I guess to that end, I know you said you didn't watch much YouTube, but are there any specific channels you like or enjoy their analysis? Have you heard of some like Every Frame a Painting or like Red Letter Media? I know they're two big ones.
Every Frame of Painting, I remember that they got a lot of views. I watched the one that he did on Jackie Chan, and it was very nicely edited. He had a very nice voice, but I thought it was pretty basic. I mean, it's great that that guy managed to get so many people
Yeah, it's
interested in what he
accessible
did.
film
Yeah,
analysis, basically.
I mean, I think maybe my stuff is a bit too probably comes
Long.
across as insane to some people because the level of detail I go into in some of my film studies, a lot of people are just like, "Whoa, back the hell off, man! You give me a headache." But I think of it as kind of like, would you go to a scientist in a laboratory and say, "You're looking too deeply into things"? No, you wouldn't. It's the scientist wants to explore the periodic table and the chemical formulas and the atomic structures of things because they really want to get to the bottom of things. And that I try and take that approach with the film analysis, but a lot of people don't want that. They want something that's more entry level. And I viewed Every Frame of Painting as being an entry level. I hope that doesn't sound snobbish on my part. He was
No,
great at
no.
he was great at what he did, and I'm aware that there's a lot of other film analysis channels that have way more views than I do. And I'm not going to say that they're all just entry level. Some of them are clearly doing a good job. So, well done to them. But I still managed to earn a living from my stuff, a decent living. And, my subscriber base has been steadily increasing over the years. And I think something that's more important to me is not the size of the subscriber base, but who is watching. So over the
Mhm.
years, I've just thousands of emails. I've got emails from lawyers, PhD level doctors, people in the film industry who know the industry technically. I've had emails from people who've actually worked on the films that I've reviewed, and most of the time it is absolutely glowing feedback. It's always very encouraging. So I'm quite happy with the quality of people that I get following my work. And every now and then somebody in the street will just come up and say, "Oh, you make those videos." And I'll have a little chat with them. And I'm always interested to see what type of person they are because sometimes you get a bit concerned. Oh, I hope my followers aren't just like total geeks with no life. But it's been great that like pretty much everyone who's ever come up to me in any context who's been a follower of the videos, when I chat to them for 5-10 minutes, they seem like really decent, intelligent people.
That must be a relief.
It is. It's a major relief. Yeah, yeah,
No crazies.
yeah. I mean, with the Kubrick stuff and the anti-authoritarian aspects, sometimes I get like the full-on conspiracy people following my stuff as well. But I think they veer away from my stuff because I start dragging them away from the David Icke type thing, and I start dragging them to a slightly more sane middle ground type of view of things. And sometimes they come along for the ride, and sometimes they back off and go, "No, I'll go for the hardcore conspiracy view of the world if you don't mind," and that's okay. That's up to them.
I think there's definitely a niche for your long form content. I know it's not the most accessible, but I definitely haven't found a channel quite like yours, and that's why I enjoyed it. And I think you actually do a good job of having short, edited down entry level videos that get people to then go to your website and watch these hour-long essays that may not be the most, accessible.
Yeah,
So I
cheers.
like
Yeah,
all those aspects. And then as for what you were just saying about conspiracy theories and you bringing them to the middle ground, I think that's also another service you do. I appreciated in one video where you made a point in I think it was the Apollo Shining conspiracy, where you said, "I'm just going to state it as it is, not give any side. These are the facts." I think you like just in preparation for this conversation, you made a point of not wanting to have misinformation out there and be careful about what you say. So I
yeah.
appreciate that too about your content.
You know what? It's I mean, like I've mentioned to you, I don't like doing live interviews. I
Yeah.
wish it wasn't like that because it's not in my personality to be like that. I'm not generally a paranoid or reserved person. Anyone who bumps into me in the street who knows me, I'll just open up to them and just talk about all kinds, whatever they want to talk about. I'm very open with people generally in the real world, but it just doesn't seem to be appreciated in the online world. And unfortunately, I've made some enemies over the years. A lot of it fallen outside of the film analysis stuff, and some of my enemies have really put a great deal of effort into trying to cause me problems. And this isn't paranoid on my part. I'm not talking
Oh
about.
no, this
I'm,
is
I'm
legitimate on the
this
internet
is
in
this.
2020.
I've
Yeah.
had court cases over this stuff. I've had people try to sue me and they've given in and dropped the case and paid all of my costs. And recently I had a 4 year court case where I was suing three parties for defamation and harassment, which is
Wow.
not related to the film analysis stuff. But yeah,
Okay.
that was a huge thing to deal with, and that went on for 4 years, and eventually that got settled recently, and we didn't have to go to trial. So yeah, I'm very aware that I've got there's people out there who are just waiting for you to make a slightly wrong statement that can be misinterpreted, or even where they can just grab a little chunk of something that you say and separate it from the context to try and make you look like a terrible person. I've had that happen. Um,
Oh yeah, I believe it. I don't think anything you do will stop it either. They'll take
no,
that clip, they'll share it if they really hate you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, even if your present enemies don't do it, somebody else might want to do it in the future. So, I mean, that's one of the golden rules I have when I'm writing my material to put online. I mean, occasionally I'll do like a sort of off the cuff chat to the camera where it's not all specifically written, but then I'll edit it down afterwards and make sure that nothing can be taken out of context. But when I'm writing the articles and the videos, I always read them back, and every single sentence I ask myself, what does that sound like on its own? Can that be taken and misinterpreted on its own? So try and structure every single sentence so that it doesn't give those kind of bullets to somebody who wants to cause problems.
So this is a good lesson you've learned a long time on the internet. Just be very aware of what you're saying because words are powerful.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen a lot of maybe real cancellations, fake cancellations. They all stem from people just being done with what they're saying.
yeah,
All right, that's kind of run down most of my questions.
yeah.
I want to, if you have a little bit of time, talk about gaming a little bit because you mentioned your daughter and Minecraft. I agree is a great tool for teaching kids. It seems very much like Lego in a way.
Yeah.
Are there any other games that you really appreciate? Maybe modern ones that I went through your top 100 list, and not to insult the taste, but they're mostly like older games. But other than like open world, any other new games genres interest you?
I really like a lot of the puzzle stuff that's been getting put out. I mean, The Witness was very high on my list.
Yeah.
Thought that was incredibly original and incredibly deep. I played Firewatch recently, which I think is about 5 or 6 years
Okay.
old. I quite like that. Not as an actual gameplay experience, but the story and presentation I found quite moving in that game. I think sometimes I do give people the impression that I'm not interested in the newest releases. It's not necessarily the case. I mean, in terms of gaming, I can't wait for the next Elder Scrolls. As soon as that comes out, I'll get it. You know, I'm looking forward to Far Cry 6. As soon as that comes out, I'm going to play that because I love the Far Cry games. I wish they would become a little bit more inventive and change the formula a bit more, but still, it's a great formula. And I've replayed several of the Far Cry games multiple times. I would say I am more enthusiastic about new games than I'm about new movies generally. You know,
That's good to hear.
yeah, yeah. So trying to think what other genres there are. I've gotten quite a lot into turn-based strategy games. XCOM 2 did that to me.
Yeah, that's a
I'd
good one.
yeah, I'd read so many great reviews on it. I thought, I watched a little bit of gameplay. I thought, I've got to give that a go. It looks really good, and I was thoroughly into it. And played, I think I played through it twice.
Have you ever heard of Civilization?
Yeah, I have. I haven't played it though.
It's a pretty intense one, but maybe if you're into some complexity and depth, the idea of running your whole empire, picking the religion, picking like the currency and how people interact, it's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. It's I think there's a little bit of a problem for me with some of that stuff in that because I spend a lot of my time doing these really in-depth studies of movies, and
Mhm.
like today I've been working on a study of a character analysis of Jaws in the James Bond movies, you know, because my daughter absolutely adored him when we were watching the Bond.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen that over the years. Kids love Jaws. So I've been studying him today, and amazingly, I've come up with 7 themes around that character that fascinate me. And I thought, wow, there's actually a hell of a lot more going on with this guy. And so throughout the day, I've sort of ended up getting a little bit of a. I exhaust myself intellectually on the subject, and then at the end of the day, I might say, right, I'll do a couple of hours of gaming or watch a movie, but I'm not in the mood for doing something that's too complex. I want something
Yeah,
that's
you
going
just
to
tune out.
be simple. So I think I tend to have a habit of playing simpler games at the moment for that reason.
So actually, this raises a question then. You mentioned like a 30 to 35 hour workload. How many hours are you watching movies a week? Is that a regular thing you do constantly?
You know what? It's not many because obviously after I've spent all day studying a movie, I don't always feel like watching one afterwards. Or if I do, I want to watch something that is completely the opposite of what I've been studying. So I
So
was doing all that stuff recently on the Blair Witch Project, and it's funny because like a lot of the feedback to that has been people saying, I wish I didn't watch your study of the film at night because now I've gone to bed and I'm seeing witches all over the room. And I was having that experience myself. I was like, I'm going to have to stop studying this movie about 3 or 4 hours before going to bed. Otherwise, I'm going to be seeing witches. And even my girlfriend, she said, oh, I watched your video on the Blair Witch Project and I went to bed and I couldn't sleep because there's witches everywhere. So
so
after
when you
that,
say study though, you're like reviewing segments of the footage over and over again for
yeah,
most of this analysis, right? Or are you thinking to yourself really?
sorry.
Or are you reviewing footage from the movie over and over again during this
Yeah,
analysis, or are
well,
you kind
well,
of
that's it.
sitting and thinking?
Like the kind of detail that I go into in movies, I don't see all that stuff in a casual watch. I have to
Mm,
stop the film over and replay things and study things and freeze frame things. There's no way I could just notice all of that stuff with a casual viewing. Um, but yeah, like after the Blair Witch Project, I was like, oh God, I need something to get this Blair Witch thing out of my head, right? Okay, I'm going to watch the Living Daylights, the Bond film, or Octopussy, or something like that. Just something just completely the opposite, escapist fun. So I'm not usually watching very intellectual films these days as a casual thing because I'm doing that in the film analysis throughout the day anyway. Um, yeah, so
yeah,
it's
fair enough.
yeah,
I think I would get burned out too. Do you ever feel burned out in movies in general? You just don't watch them?
yeah, a little bit, yeah. It's a funny one because like whatever film study I'm doing, it's always something that I'm genuinely interested in and enthusiastic. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother doing it. I hardly ever say to myself, right, I'll do this video because it will sell well, or this one because it'll get a lot of views. Sometimes I try to push myself in that direction as a kind of, to make sort of like wise business decisions. But at the end of the day, I find the best approach is to just let the movies select me. And when I do that, I end up producing my best content because I'm so into those movies. So I never really feel that much burnt out of it because I'm always enjoying whichever project I'm working on. And to an extent, you could say whatever project I'm working on at a particular point in time is my favorite movie for the time that I'm working on it.
Interesting. So, I mean, over the last 10, 15 years, you really don't feel like you've ever gotten burnt out? You've been pretty well about pacing it?
You know what? I've still got the enthusiasm for it.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear.
Yeah. There are lots and lots of other things I want to do, and I've got a lot of plans at the moment. I'm going to be moving house probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm going to be getting a much bigger workspace, and I'm going to be getting a lot of new equipment, and I'm intending to set up, sort of podcast type situation, probably along the lines of what you're doing, maybe,
Nice.
and hopefully a proper physical space for doing person to person interviews. I'm really looking forward to doing all that stuff, and I would like to go and make some fiction films of my own. I've got tons and tons of ideas of other things that I can do besides film analysis. But the film analysis still is very enjoyable, and there's no sign of burnout because I've got a list of hundreds of potential projects for film analysis, and sometimes I just don't know which one to pick next because there's so many of them.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I think a lot of times when I talk to these really inspired creators, they usually have the same response that they just never have an ending supply of ideas because they're always working on what they want and not, corporate deal, a sponsorship deal.
Yeah,
So it's good to hear. I think it's a very wholesome approach. I hope more people take it if they're able.
yeah, yeah, and it makes you happier as well and healthier.
Well, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing in life, you think? Like if there was no YouTube, no internet, just kept going along.
Oh, I'd probably be trying to make fiction films and trying to break into the industry, which is pretty tough here in Britain because our film industry has just been so dead for so long. Um, I won't go too much into that. I don't want to upset people too much who are in the industry in Britain, but it's just been really dead. I mean, I had some funny experiences with that in the past, where you're trying to get funding, and there was just basic things like the people who were funding film projects, they didn't want the writer and the director to be the same person. They wanted them to be separate, and it's like, oh, come on, that's no good. I don't want to just be confined to one role. I want to be an auteur who's involved in the entire process. So things like
I'm
that
sure
just
that
put
there's
me
a
off.
reason for that.
Yeah, well, it allows the people who are doing the funding to completely control the content and the end result.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, so it sounds like, yeah, you picked a pretty good path in life then. You've done exactly what you've wanted, you've evolved, you've adapted to the internet, and you're still doing it to this day with no sign of burning out.
Cheers.
All right. I don't know. I guess that's all the main questions I had for you. I'm sure we could talk for ages, though. I think we both have a lot of overlap, and I definitely want to do this again sometime. But any final thoughts on your mind? Anything worrying you? Something on your mind today?
You know what? Well, I'll bring up one subject. There was a few subjects
All
that
right.
I think I sent to you that a few of them we didn't cover, but one of them I will bring up what I called fashionable anger.
Outrage, cancel culture.
Yeah, well, not just in terms of those things, which they're getting talked about a lot, but generally, I mean, something that really brought this to the forefront of my mind recently. I've been aware of it for many years anyway, but I was saying I was watching the James Bond movies with my daughter, and I was thinking back to how I loved going to the cinema to watch Bond films as a kid and how fun they were. And you had an absolute blast going to the cinema to watch a Bond movie. And so I showed my daughter the first Timothy Dalton Bond film. I showed her one of the Sean Connery ones, and I showed her all the Roger Moore ones because she loved all of them. And seeing how much enjoyment she got out of it, and I thought to myself, what about those Daniel Craig Bond films? Let's see, I'm not going to show that to my daughter, the first Casino Royale, because it's got a sexual torture scene. It's also a lot more violent. There's not much fun in it. It's cold and brutal. She's not going to like it, and I wouldn't want to show it to her anyway because of that kind of content. And I realised at that point that the Bond franchise has basically abandoned kids. And I thought,
I see.
wow, that's an awful thing that they've done that. I never really thought of it that way before, but that's what's happened. And
So,
they've abandoned it because fashionable anger is such a big thing in entertainment these days. People are saying they want Bond to be more brutal and cold and dark and, well, they use the term realistic, but there's never been a realistic Bond film and there never will. They're all silly, including the Daniel Craig ones.
okay, let me define this maybe then, because I was taking fashionable anger to be like outrage culture. So you're saying it more as like the gritty noir aesthetic that's sweeping through mainstream pop culture, maybe like Batman versus Superman or like Dark
Yes,
Knight.
yes, it's there in the
Okay, I see.
superhero movies, it's there in the James Bond, but it also, I think, overlaps with the cancel outrage culture as well. People seem to have this idea today that anger is a virtue, that it's this powerful thing that gives you credibility, and well, they think it gives you power, being angry. And it's funny because I was watching The Empire Strikes Back with my daughter, and you got Yoda in there, and he's saying, "Hate, anger, the dark side
Yeah.
are these." And I was thinking, my God, everyone needs a little bit of Yoda's wisdom today. And as it Luke, he asks Yoda, "How will I know the good side from the bad?" And Yoda says, "You will know when you are calm, at peace." I think he says tranquil or passive or something like that. And I was like, my God, these words are just absolutely bang on with the problems of today. So many people have abandoned their sense of fun and enjoyable fantasy, and it's showing in some of the video games. It's showing in a lot of the movies, and the traditional family movie. Like the original Superman movie, even though it was quite dark, but it had a lot of comedy and fun for the kids. And the old Bond films, and Indiana Jones, they were violent, but they were also funny, and they had a sort of positive philosophical outlook on life. And now this cold, cynical, angry, violent mentality seems to be something that so many people like and think is respectable. And yeah, I think I just mentioned that to you in the email because it was a big thought that I've had lately that I just wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it sparks a thought in me too, because people also have the opposite idea too, where they say everything is becoming genericized, especially in gaming. It's becoming easier to play, toned down. Everything's too complex. They want it to be accessible.
Yeah.
Everything treating toward Nintendo. So, and this is sort of like the opposite case now, where what would you call it? Like a crave for realism, just the idea of like it's more intense if we get to feel like the visceral reality of it. But what is the drive that's
Yeah,
making
I
us?
think there's some sort of mix up between the perception of realism and the perception of anger. To me, anger's not realism. If a person is severely angry, it's probably because they've misinterpreted something, or they've got the wrong expectation, and reality hasn't lived up to it. I tend to think that wise people who have a good understanding of what's going on in the world can face the most horrific situations and be calm about it and reasonable and not react with this desire to kill or to hurt other people, or to shout them down. Yeah, that's it really. It's just a general thought. I haven't completely worked this stuff out in my head. It's a recent thought process that's really come to me
Here,
quite strongly.
yeah, here's one theory. Do you think this is like a technological driven thing where as we got the uncanny valley shrinking more and more, people want this realistic, brutal depiction, and maybe it'll move into a more animated, fantastical tone as CGI gets better? I don't know.
I don't think it's technology driven because thinking back over the years, I started to notice that it emerged in the 90s in music. I mean, heavy metal, which I've always, since my 20s, I've been a big heavy metal fan. I listen to all kinds of music, but heavy metal started to get really heavy in the 1990s, and it was full of anger and rage and cynicism and self-hatred and all that kind of stuff. And I listened to tons of it and took it all in. And there's a lot of albums came out from then that I still think are absolutely brilliant. I mean, like Nine Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral is so unbelievably negative, but I still think it's a work of creative genius. But yeah, I think there was a huge trend coming along with what was the other form of music that you had came out there? Grunge became extremely. It was fused with negativity and self-loathing, and I'm so cynical about the whole world. And this is before the internet, so I think it was already going on back then, and I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, there was some reaction to the 80s. The 80s was very flamboyant and full of crazy over the top positivity, which showed in movies. And I think people started to react against that. And
Yeah.
I don't know why they reacted against it, but it infected music, it infected movies. Actually, I think gaming has probably been spared a lot from it, but it's still there in some of the gaming. It's a big cultural trend that I'm concerned about because it's definitely filtered into politics, and it's certainly become part of the whole cancel culture thing and the big division in society where people, you either love or hate Brexit, or you love or hate Trump, or you love or hate trans people. There's all these issues where people are just driven by so much anger, and anger leads to hatred, obviously. I
Of
mean,
course.
serial killers are full of anger, but they're not very well connected to reality, and it doesn't lead them to a good place either. So I just wish people would start to acquire a lot more of a sense of fun again, playful fun, and just childish enjoyment and experimentation with the world. Um, yeah, haven't really thought of exactly how I would word this. I'm just rambling off the
Yeah.
top of my head, my thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I guess now I'm thinking of it more clearly. It's not even the aesthetic of being realistic or gritty. It is like how anger is depicted and used. Like, I'm trying to think of like a counter example to this, maybe. Well, I know a recent criticism on the Justice League or Batman vs Superman is just how angry they are all the time and how violent it is.
Yeah.
So maybe it just is it really that sort
You
of
know
old
what?
argument of
Actually,
too much violence
yeah,
on TV?
yeah. You just triggered a thought in me there, which I knew I wanted to say this, but I'd forgot about it. Is that I think a lot of people have become kind of ashamed about fun and positivity.
Hmm.
And again, I think some of this stems back to the 80s. People talk about 80s stuff as being very cheesy because
Yeah,
there was a lot of fun, and it was clearly unrealistic fun, and it was clearly fantasy in a lot of ways. And
the violent, but
I think a lot of
yeah, I
people
see.
became ashamed that they were enjoying. And now that people talk about things from that era and things earlier from the 70s, they often talk about those things as guilty pleasures. Why do they need to
Hmm.
feel guilty about something that is just fun fantasy escapism? And there's no agenda built into it. It's not real, but you enjoy it for the basic fantasy that it is. There's nothing wrong with that, but people seem ashamed of it. And I get the impression that people have been turning to angry versions of these kinds of
Yeah.
guilty pleasures because they think that if the humor is removed and the bright colors are removed and it's replaced with anger and negativity, then it somehow makes the fantasy more real and less
Maybe more
shame.
mature too,
Yeah, it
like
makes
a
it.
grown-up version of what I
Yeah, it
liked.
makes it seem less shameful. But to me, it's the opposite. It becomes more silly because it's fused with fake anger.
Hmm. And then I guess one franchise that I thought of that really countered this is like Star Wars Disney, where they've sort of genericized now and they take well outside some of the superhero films, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know any other gross offenders of this that you see in media or
It's
anything your daughter
interesting that you
watches.
bring up the Disney Star Wars there because, yeah, a lot of people hate those movies. I'm not overwhelmed with joy with them either. I found them worth a watch. But there was a lot of positive response. I mean, George Lucas himself, I think he made a big mistake with the amount of sort of cynicism that was in his prequel films. Even though he'd
Hmm.
made the incredible original films, I think he kind of lost his way with those prequels in terms of the tone. A lot of the positivity was lost, and the Jedi's became very serious and boring. And I think people were glad to see the Disney movies trying to get back to the original fun from the old Star Wars movies. But still, there's a lot of anger. I still detect a lot of moments of sort of fake anger in those new Star Wars movies and fake cynicism. They have the jokes and stuff here and there, but like the character who was Han Solo's son, who is the pissed off Jedi. He basically looks like Marilyn Manson, doesn't he? So
Hmm.
I still see the fake anger as having still infected even the Disney Star Wars movies.
This sort of edgy, rebellious counterculture,
Yeah,
you still see this remnant in it. Interesting.
yeah.
And I maybe it is a bit technological too. Maybe not in the CGI aesthetic way, but just like as news spreads, as the overall tone of information gets more negative, this is just how the outlook on the world is.
Yeah, I suppose extremely negative news media certainly plays its role. I mean, I suppose you could say people are very annoyed with various aspects of their lives anyway, and maybe they really are angry deep down about certain social things that are going on. I don't know exactly what those things are. I mean, I could take a guess at it, but it might not be right. And maybe they seek out these fantasy expressions of anger in entertainment that satisfies that itch, you know. But I'm wondering, who is it in the real world who they want to beat up and kill?
I think in some sense, like modern culture is so peaceful. You have so few issues in life. You have to seek this conflict either through games online or just getting in online arguments. Maybe there is this drive to find that other because none exists in most civilized
Yeah,
society.
maybe it is. Maybe it's just the caveman that's still there in all of us, no matter what.
Yeah, I hate Rob because he said this about my favorite movie. That's just it. I just need that enemy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well. Anyway, that's I think that's about all I can think of to say on that. But maybe at some point in the future, I might make a video on it. It's more carefully thought out.
Yeah, I've definitely explored some thoughts here too. I enjoyed this. We should do this again sometime.
Yeah,
Either of
great.
you recorded whatever you like. I hope,
Okay.
is there anything you want to plug at the end? Your Patreon, your YouTube channel, anything I should point people to?
Yeah, I suppose if you provide the links there for the listeners, I mean, the website collativelearning.com, COLLATIVE, and collate means to gather material together and organize it. For those who, a lot of people think it's collective learning. So yeah, that's the website, Collative Learning. And then the Patreon is just Rob Ager, Ager. So you can access a lot of my content on there. But if you're completely new to my work, then just check out the YouTube channel because there's dozens and dozens of hours of content there on all kinds of subjects, usually film analysis based, but within film analysis covering lots and lots of different subjects. Yeah.
Yeah, just search a movie you find interesting or look at his most popular even. I think they're all pretty accessible. And even if you haven't watched The Shining, maybe it'll get you interested to go watch it. I don't know. But yeah, it was a joy talking to you, spending 2 hours learning about this and getting a bit of social stuff out of the lockdown. So thank you again for
Yeah.
responding.
Well,
So
thanks,
open.
Chris. Thanks for good questions and good thoughts of your own as well. You know, it's quite a stimulating conversation. You helped me out a few times there when I was sort of getting lost in my own thoughts.
I did feel like it.
All right. Okay, Chris. Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Bye bye.
Bye.